Betsy DeVos warns Connecticut schools that they could lose funding for allowing confused men to play women's sports. Rather than fine the offenders, how about just suing non-compliant schools on behalf of excluded girls? I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with Betsy DeVos flexing some more muscle as she threatens to pull funding from schools that support biological boys competing against girls on the high school level and the middle school level. She's exactly right about this. Someone has to stand up for these girls. These boys have a built-in advantage. You can pretend you can transition all you want, pump yourself full of hormone treatments all you want. You still have a anatomically and an unjust advantage over traditionally abled girls. Get over it. And so what Betsy DeVos is telling these schools in Connecticut, who are still, despite the Title IX advice on this, are still going to go ahead and allow boys to compete against girls, win most of the trophies, and disenfranchise young female athletes. I don't stand for it. I don't think America stands for it. And Betsy DeVos doesn't stand for it. Here's my thinking, though. Instead of threatening them and warning them what would happen, just start suing them, right? Don't fine them. Don't, fail to recognize their participation in these kinds of programs. Just sue them. Use the power, because that's what the Obama administration threatened to do when they initially rewrote Title IX with their Dear Calling letter, right? Giving all sorts of unconstitutional powers to universities to enforce all sorts of unconstitutional things vis-a-vis Title IX. Now you're in charge. Now you've put title back to what it should have been. Start using the power of the Department of Justice to punish severely any school that wants to play these kinds of gender games.
And so what the Department of Ed actually came out and did now is they're threatening to withhold the roughly $18 million from specifically Connecticut school districts unless they withdraw from the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference, which was the big, news story. We've talked about this many a time in all across the nation, but really in Connecticut, that conference said, yep, biological boys, if you think you're a girl and you want to compete with the girls and basically beat all the girls, that's okay by us. So now the Department of Ed is going to withhold roughly $18 million. And school districts that are in New Haven, Hartford, and Southeast Connecticut were supposed to get a total of about $45 million in aid for these 5-year grants. But the Education Department's Office for Civil Rights has warned officials that they have till basically now, today, essentially, to withdraw from the conference or they're going to get the remaining funds just cut. They're not going to get them at all. And that's they've been warned about this across the nation. These stories have been put out there, and yet no real action, like you're saying, no real action has been taken until this is like the biggest action moving forward. And it's about time because these girls are just being left out to hang to dry, basically.
And there's no doubt about this. I mean, what you're doing here is egregiously wrong, and you've got the power of the purse over them. Stop sending them money. Force them to conform. Here's the thing. If you were really serious, transgender advocates, if you were really serious about providing a safe space for your athletes to perform, you would be asking not for boys to run against women. You would be advocating for transgenders to run or lift or throw against other transgenders, right? You keep telling us how transgenderism is something that's very different than cisgenderism. So it's bad when boys who think they're girls have to compete with boys. It's not fair. Of course it's fair. They're boys. But you decided that. So now you're going to take those boys who are boys and you're going to force them to compete against girls where they're going to win more often than not. That's not fair either. If you were actually consistent, you would be advocating for a separate place in our high school and middle school education, college sports programs for transgenders to play and compete against other transgenders. But you know why you won't do that? Because if you do that, the men transgenders are always going to beat the women. Always. And so you recognize that in order to get for you a separate place for trans people to compete against trans people, you would have to acknowledge the inherent biological advantage of being male. And you don't want to do that. So rather than do that and be forced to concede something that the rest of us know, you're happy forcing those boys to run against those girls. It is shameful. It is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. You don't want inclusion. You want to make everybody, give everybody everybody what they need to succeed in their own lane. You want the boys to enter the girls' lane and outsource them for your twisted ideology. You're a bunch of cowards and hypocrites.
And since you're talking about lanes, we're going to talk specifically about track and field, because that's where this really has taken place in Connecticut specifically, where you had three girls, Selena Soul, Alana Smith, and Chelsea Mitchell. Those three girls, along with their mothers, which I thought was an interesting note, it was with their mothers, not fathers, but mothers. They were being represented by the Alliance for Defending Freedom. They had to put a lawsuit forward because they were denied opportunities to compete at higher levels because two boys, primarily these two boys in the state of Connecticut, kept beating these actual females, and so they took home first place. And that has real implications for college scholarships being, noticed. And obviously the hard work that they put in. If you look at the examples they have dating back into 2017, this has been going on for them. Those two boys, took home 15 women's state championship titles that were held in 2016 by 9 different Connecticut girls. These two boys just came in the next year and said, bloop, gone.
We keep hearing from these schools that they want greater competition, they want greater balance. You're completely imbalancing the scale here for less than a handful, a couple fingers full of boys who've decided all of a sudden that they couldn't really compete against the boys at the highest level, but they can reap in award after award after award by running against actual girls.
Yeah, and because of this, just in the past 3 seasons of track, those boys have been then denying the girls 85 different opportunities to be able to participate at higher levels. So getting onto, sectionals and state and all that. And Mitchell, specifically Chelsea Mitchell, was ranked the fastest biological girl in the state in the 55 meter and lost 4 girls state championships and 2 all New England awards because of this, because you're giving it to let boys.
I realize what I'm about to make is kind of an extreme comparison, but I'm going to make it anyway, just to try to highlight how stupid this is. This would be like taking healthy, high-performing young girls in middle school and high school and transferring them to the Special Olympics. And then watching as the Special Olympics awards are all being won by otherwise healthy natural girls who do not have Down syndrome. That's exactly what this is. I get the gap between healthy women and Down syndrome people, maybe a little higher, a little bit greater than that between boys and girls, but not that much. And if we did that, or what if we allowed transgender boys to run at the Special Olympics? Because that's a special quality, right? Why not let them run? I guarantee you people would see in greater droves just how wicked this is.
Well, over in the UK, pretty much just like here in America, you will be made to care about everything LGBT. And now in the UK, you must teach LGBT issues, or the Ofsted, which is the British schools regulator, is going to come after you by giving your school a, quote, requires improvement rating. So you're actually going to get rated down and needing improvement if you don't teach LGBT issues. So an Ofsted spokesman had said that the Department for Education's guidance makes it clear that secondary schools must teach about LGBT issues. Therefore, for next summer, if secondary schools do not teach about all the protected characteristics, they will receive a judgment of requires improvement for leadership and management. However, the government guidance is that primary schools have more discretion over when LGBT issues are age appropriate, and so they won't necessarily be marked down.
So
yeah, sure.
Teach about, I love the phrasing, protected characteristics. What the hell does that mean? And what educational standard or basis in educational thought are you working with? Protected characteristics? What, is this the ability to protect the right to be limp-wristed? And I don't use that as a slur, but when you say protected characteristics, it sounds to me like stereotypes. What you mean are stereotypes. Stereotypical accounts of, like, while you're constantly dragging drag queens into your British schools to read to kids. Again, drag queens are men pretending to be women, but you'll bring them in arguing that you're teaching tolerance towards alternative sexualities. You're not doing any such thing. These are gay men, generally, dressed as women. They're men pretending to be women, clearly with regards to drag queens, but you use them as some kind of a statement because they wear flamboyant clothing that the little 5-year-olds react to. You're not teaching this is what they mean by teaching characteristics, right? Clothing, stereotypical aspects of things. And what does any of this have to do with the day-to-day routine of a modern high school?
We don't know, but it's the UK.
You're going to be made to care, as Katie says.
Exactly. The Ofsted also reported, and they asserted that the schools, they're still going to be allowed to teach the tenets of any faith on the protected characteristics.
Are they allowed to teach what it means to be characteristically heterosexual?
Such as that same-sex pairs should not marry or engage in sexual relations according to a particular religion. However, if they do so, they must also explain the legal rights LGBT people have under UK law, and that this and LGBT people must be respected.
Right.
So if you only teach LGBT, do you have to teach the other way?
No, you don't.
No.
But if you want to teach that Islam and Christianity and Judaism traditionally oppose homosexual relationships, you have to point out that they're legally on the wrong side of this issue.
Like immediately after.
Like you said, you will respect, right? Where's the respect for the other side?
That's what it is.
Where are you telling parents and children and high school age kids that they will respect people whose religion disagrees with their political ideology, their personal sexual ideology? That's not there, right?
Well, but it's still not enough for the National Secular Society, the NSS. Sounds kind of like something else.
Does something Nazi-ish.
They are furious that any faith in British schools can remain. How dare you even still say that Islam or Christianity opposes such things? No, they say it's wholly incongruent for Ofsted to penalize schools that refuse to teach about LGBT people, but turn a blind eye with faith schools that teach being LGBT is morally wrong. All pupils should be entitled to study in a welcoming and accepting school that doesn't make them feel ashamed about who they are.
Except religious people, right? What you just said. How dare you, teachers? How dare you respect these people? How dare you include and respect these people who have religious worldviews when every kid should be allowed to attend a school that values all views except those views?
Yeah, well, we're going to move on from that one because we got another story for the UK because we're finding out, shocker among shockers, that the working class white kids are actually the most disadvantaged kids in the UK's public schools. So, shocker, again, I am shooketh. That's my new phrase.
Please,
I am shooketh.
On behalf of all the coal miners' daughters and sons in rural UK who don't have the luxury of being gay or transgendered, please, sir, may we have some more, please?
Well, the report from the House of Commons Education Select Committee revealed that working-class white students are 50% less likely than their minority counterparts to score strong passes in the 8th grade, General Certificate of Secondary Education exams that are used by colleges and universities to determine, how their academic level actually is. So progress scores from last year showed that white pupils fell while almost every minority group went up, which is good that they're going up. But it's not good that the others are going down.
Here's the question. Here's the $64,000 question. Ooh. Are they going up because you're actually teaching them higher levels of math and English, or are they raising because you've completely transformed curriculum to this kind of stuff, where to be a minority is to be a victim, which means you get socially promoted. To be a boring old white kid means you're guilty of white supremacy and white privilege. So we have to dock your grades even if you're outperforming everybody.
That's sad.
Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, but that's depressing. You sound like Oxford University professor Peter Edwards, who told the Daily Mail that the reason for the discrepancy was that issues facing white working-class students are seen as unfashionable and not worthy. And he suggested that among academics, just discussing the issues is seen as taboo, which it is, because educators link it with hard right political thinking.
Yes. So go gay or go minority or get in trouble. And now do you understand why there are so many idiots out there pretending to be black, particularly in academia? We've had a half dozen stories in the last year about academics pretending to be something that they're not. Well, you've just told them that your concerns, your problems, your learning disabilities, your struggle to be educated doesn't matter if you're not one of these new preferred genders. Literally, we have lesbian, gay, and BIPOC privilege going on here, right? That if you are those things, you get a pass. You're not learning more than the coal miner's daughter kid. You're not learning more. You're just being valued more because you're not them. And as the professor said, to even discuss, like we're doing here, they'll say you're part of the hard right. You're a right-wing Nazi. To even point out that these kids, Traditional white male and female kids are falling way behind. To point that out makes you alt-right, according to them.
And he sees this as obviously being detrimental, and he calls it a grave socioeconomic and sociopolitical consequences, warning to the future that this is going to lead to a disturbing narrative and a vicious spiral downwards. I believe this is an utterly critical point, not only to utilize the huge untapped potential there surely must be, but also the real threat of the destabilization of the very fabric of the country.
And the destabilization of the fabric of that country and ours is the point. It is not to breed equal playing fields or equality. It is to put in charge the people who haven't been and let them punish anybody who's part of the status quo for 2,000 years of mostly made-up oppression.
So I would like to implement a new segment on this show called When Professors Take to Twitter. I think we should start this. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see this more often. But we have a story called When Professors Take to Twitter, and it's Marshall University out of West Virginia, a biology professor named Jennifer Mosher. She was having a rough go, and she decided to deliver one of her virtual lectures on Twitter, of all places. And she said this about a Trump rally.
I am so frustrated and just, I don't know what else to do. You can't argue with them. You can't talk sense into them. I said to somebody yesterday, I hope they all die before the election. That's the only saving hope I have right now. Definitely bootlickers.
Now, I've been put through the Title IX mill at my current ridiculous university. I have had anonymous emails sent. I have childish behavior. I've had students sending other students to my office hours to try to get me to say something politically correct outside of class that they can. It's never worked. They've tried it. But I have never said in my 25 years of schooling anything like that. I've never said in the classroom that I wished any people who disagreed with me were dead. I never said anything like that, anything close to like that. That horrible statement that she made is shocking. And just rest assured that if I had ever said anything like that in the confines of my work as a university professor on a college campus, I wouldn't be here right now.
Well, don't worry. She was actually suspended from the university because, again, Twitter is where she put this, and Twitter is a trash heap. In case you didn't know, if you didn't know that means you're not on Twitter. Stay off of Twitter. It's bad. But for your own health, stay off of Twitter.
All the organizations that rally to these professors when they're getting fired, when they're getting in trouble, where are they to rally against this kind of speech? Right? The ones who are quick to defend all this stuff and say, these are professors, they're tenured, leave them alone. Well, who is it that's looking out for the kids that they're attacking here? Where is the university support? Oh, by all means, get rid of the offending professor. But where is your heartwarming outreach? Where is the creation of a new Trump community center in the middle of your campus? I mean, that's what happens. Somebody says this about LGBTQ, right? And that person gets suspended, and what? A $40 million LGBTQ exclusive building gets built, right? Somebody says this about minority students, and wham, you've got your own segregated dorm for black people. Where is the Trump Center at the University of Marshall University? Where is the new Trump Central to take care of these poor offended kids by this wicked teacher?
I feel like when we get these stories and the university actually does something immediately with the professor, like actually gets rid of them, I feel like it's always at smaller universities. Like, I've never heard of Marshall University out of West Virginia ever until now. I mean, if this was a professor at Harvard or any of the Ivies or any of the big California schools, they're the ones who bring out the university statements of, well, we're looking into this issue. It's a personnel matter, and we cannot comment on it. But the ones who actually take action are the little piddly ones who can't afford the big Trump Center.
Marshall's actually a decent-sized university in West Virginia.
Sorry.
It's probably the second biggest behind University of West Virginia.
It's West Virginia.
But remember, we had the story about Nick Sandmann going to Transylvania, which is also in West Virginia. Now, that's a tiny little school. And remember what happened there. Before he even set foot on that campus, you had the ACLU attacking him.
Well, that's because it's Nick Sandmann.
Right,
that's
okay.
Highbrow
But you also had a faculty member attacking him before he got there. My point is that whenever kids are treated this way, whenever students of certain backgrounds are called out and betrayed and downtrodden by their professors, it always results in action, right? There's always a center being built or another diversity hire. Where's the diversity hire at Marshall University? The political diversity action vice chancellor now, who's been hired to rectify what that idiot professor said, right? We don't have them. There is no representation for those kids in the UK. Those boring old white kids who are falling farther and farther behind. They don't have a battery of highly paid, government-paid activists and advisors and diversity officers who are going to take up their cause. There's nobody. You just insulted probably 35 to 40% of college-age children, young people. You just radically defamed them, and there's no consequence for this other than this. Well, we got rid of the teacher, but where's my center? Where's my diversity hire? Where's my reparations, right? They never do it.
It's time for some real education. The Bosch Parade is a floating parade inspired by Dutch artist Hieronymus Bosch, born around 1450 and died in 1516, and held on the Damel River in the Netherlands. To participate in the parade, artists from all over the country build incredibly detailed and creative floats featuring musical instruments, performances, and even fire shows. Organizers say that the festival explores boundaries and moves away from the beaten tracks so as to give new impulses to our cultural environment, much like Bosch himself did back in the day. The next Bosch Parade will start on June 17th, 2021, so make sure to free up your schedule because it's quite a sight to see.
Yes, this will be a wonderful thing to go to. Bosch's last name isn't really Bosch. He was born in the town of S. Hertogenbosch, so he's Hieronymus of Bosch. And so this little community to commemorate every year one of the most fantastically wild painters in human history. Imagine Salvador Dali in the Middle Ages, and you've got Hieronymus Bosch. Take a look at this picture, the Garden of Earthly Delights there in the center. And I wish you could get a close-up of it a little more, but if you study it, you could just see all these odd shapes, all of these odd creatures, particularly in the panel on the right, hell, where you see flying fish on spears. You have all sorts of squid-like characters. You have human beings being born or at least incubated in fluid-filled eggs and sacks. You have, remember, between 1450, this is probably 1480, 1490, you have Hieronymus Bosch creating with his imagination this vision of the creation of Adam and Eve. On the left, you've got the earthly bounties there, right? The seven deadly sins and what they can live through in terms of sensuality, and then you've got the panel on the right of hell, this triptych. She's absolutely it beggars anything that Salvador Dali tried to do in terms of his or the Cubists tried to do, Picasso, in rearranging a reality. Now you go to the parade. The parade is here every year to go on the river there to create that seems to be some kind of a squid-like thing with a chicken body, right? Something fresh out of the warped imagination of Hieronymus Bosch floating down the river. And look at the faces, even the people in the water who are guiding these floats dress like characters from the paintings. Take a look at the next one. These incredible tubular horns. It's almost Seussian. It's almost Dr. Seussian, isn't it? And you see these things come cruising down the river. Take a look at the next image. Right? I mean, it's just the coloring, the shape of these people is pretty staggering. You know, it really is remarkable. This would be can you imagine being taxed with creating a float for this? And literally, it's not like these floats that we drive down New York streets, right, for Thanksgiving. This is actually things that float. You get it? They're called floats because back when you used to float them down rivers, not drive them in parades. And you can take a look at some of the squid-like bottom half of one of Bosch's creations, right? There it is being navigated down. It's just there's the fish I told you about. These fish speared. See the fish that are almost jumping from the water with actual legs? You can see the legs kicking on the back of those fish as they soar above the water. Again, something like some weird tentacled thing. So if you ever have a chance to sit down and look at Bosch's paintings, and then you ever want to go visit Europe in the summer, in June, stop by Hertogenbosch, and you can see floating down the river these great floats in honor of their local hero.
I'm going to get right on that. So just as a reminder, since Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are being, let's say, not the biggest fans
Prissy.
of our show, there we go, prissy, our content has been demonetized. And so we've decided to go all around them and have a Patriot Club. So with a one-time $99 tax-deductible donation, you can join the Patriot Club, and we're going to send you this handsome stainless steel tumbler as a little thank you. You visit patriotclub.us to get started. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day, which is there have been 1.3 billion Twitter accounts made, but only 550 million have ever sent a tweet, and more than 500 million visit the site each month. But they don't log in. So the translation to all of this is basement dwellers live on Twitter, so don't be a basement dweller.
And that wraps up this show for Freedom Project. I'm Dr. Duke, and she is Katie. Until next time, stay away from twitting, my friends.